Gate down, began to break the doors and the windows and had access to the house. Of course, out of panic, we were trying to find safe places to hide. They followed us up to the bedrooms. And the moment they entered my bedroom, where I was with my wife and a colleague of mine, who's a former Minister of Transport, they immediately opened fire. I saw them shoot my friend twice. They located where I was and fired in my direction 2 times. Missed. Actually, part of my hair was scraped off. I walked away with some gunpowder. I don't know how I survived, but I survived. My wife equally, who was close to where my friend was narrowly missed by those bullets. They never said anything to us. They just got in and started shooting.
And who were they?
Zambia Army, the military for the Zambian government.
What happened to the former minister who was shot twice?
I'm reliably informed that he has died.
And what's his name?
His name is Honorable Muto Twekafwaya. My bodyguard too, Richard Banda, I'm told he has also died.
Zambia's opposition leader, Brian Mundubile, on harrowing events at his house, just days after people voted in elections. Zambians have voted for a president and members of parliament, but the question hanging over these elections isn't just about who wins or loses. It's putting Zambia's democratic credentials, long held as a shining example on the continent, to the test. I'm Martine Dennis, and this is Africa Here and Now.
There are a number of people we can't account for, because from the time it happened, we've had no phones. It's been very difficult in trying to keep safe. We can't account for a number of individuals that were with me in the house at the time. We scampered in no direction because you have 70 people breaking the house down. Each one of us was trying to find some safe place to hide. So my presidential spokesperson, who is a member of parliament for Lukasha, George Chisanga, is equally missing. We have a gentleman, Patrick Mwansa, is also missing. I have a nephew of mine, Francis Mulenga, is also missing. My driver, Moses Mutambo, is also missing. Yeah, there's quite a number of individuals, apart from the security that were outside, that are still missing. We do not know whether they're still alive.
So you've been given no indication as to where these people are and what their condition may be.
There's been no information at all. The government has remained mute. At some point, they were refuting. They actually were saying there was no attack at all until we took cameras there. The heads of missions, observer missions, visited the site yesterday. They've got all the pictures and everything.
Yeah, because the government is saying that you and your opposition colleagues are making up a lot of this, a lot of these stories in order to deflect away from what they say is an election that you're losing.
Not at all. Not at all. As a matter of fact, it's the other way around. We have had a number of concerns from Friday. The Electoral Commission of Zambia announced the suspension of the announcement of results. We questioned the reasons. There was no reason whatsoever that would warrant or merit the suspension. They made reference to violence on the streets. Our response was that the 2021 election was very violent. As far as we're concerned, these elections have been fairly peaceful. And therefore, we wondered why they had army trucks all over the streets and also army personnel around the polling stations. So we further raised concerns, Martin. Our concerns during that period of suspension, the Electoral Commission of Zambia called for Gen 20 forms, which are forms that are filled at the polling station level to show the results, presidential candidate, parliamentary level, and councillor level. So during that time, there was a suspension. The Electoral Commission of Zambia called for these Gen 20 forms. It's alleged that they called for these Gen 20 forms, a procedure that is not supported by any law, because those forms are supposed to be transmitted through laid down procedures and not to be called by the Electoral Commission of Zambia to the districts. So we wondered why these forms were called to the districts. We are equally concerned about the chain of custody of these electoral materials, including ballots, because now the army and the intelligence officers have been involved in the handling of these documents. something we find to be very unusual.
So very unusual is what you say. How much confidence do you have, Mr. Mundubile, in this election yielding a credible result?
From what has happened so far and what I've described, this election cannot yield credible results. And I want to repeat, a credible result is where the electoral materials, the chain of custody, the handling is through laid down procedures. There is nowhere in the rules that electoral materials are handed over to the army officers or indeed intelligence officers to possess them for some time before they're handed over to the rightful authorities. Secondly, the original information comes from the polling stations and is recorded on a form we call the Gen 20. That's the origin of every result. Now, if these Gen 20s are called by unauthorized officers and keep them in their possessions, there is a possibility for alteration of these particular documents. This is where our questions are coming from. Hence the questioning of the credibility of this particular election.
And how are you going to respond? What are you going to do once the election result is finally announced? How are you going to respond to that?
Well, it's maybe too early to speak, but what we are insisting on now, we cannot accept a presidential result merely because it has been announced. If credible and material questions concerning the underlying electoral records remain unanswered, these are questions that we put through to the ECZ. They need to provide answers. So they do not expect us to accept the result just because it has been announced.
Now, very early on in this process, you actually questioned the independence of the ECZ, which is the Electoral Commission of Zambia. Is that something, are you still maintaining that you doubt the independence of members of the Electoral Commission?
Yes, indeed. I doubt the independence of members of the Electoral Commission. To the extent that even the suspension was motivated by the UPND as a party. We were reliably informed that the ECZ had a meeting with the UPND as a party before they announced the suspension. So it was not a decision that they made independently. It was a partisan decision that was influenced by participants in this particular electoral process.
And your complaint about the makeup of the Electoral Commission was part of an array of complaints that you were making about the general conditions under which you were forced to campaign. Tell us more about that. I mean, for instance, you said that you were forced to cross Zambia by road.
Exactly. It all started by soon after the official campaign started. ECZ decided to suspend campaigns when we were already out there and our people already in the field. We lost 5 days, and yet we only had under 90 days to do a countrywide campaign. They set up a timetable for us, which we followed religiously. But at every juncture, the police stopped us from holding our meetings. It was a struggle every day just to hold a meeting. And, this caused untold misery and difficulty in us conducting our campaigns. We, however, tried our best to go through 9 out of 10 provinces in the country.
And why haven't you been to the 10th region in the country?
When we were doing our 9th province, we experienced shooting. We were tear gassed, something that we had experienced in 3 other provinces. But the one in the 9th province, it was really bad. The violence from the police, the violence from the UPND political cadres. We were later informed that the attacks on us would be worse if we went to the 10th province, being the stronghold for our colleagues. So we decided to have a virtual rally instead.
And how would you like these particular issues to be resolved? What should take place, in your opinion, that could rectify some of these problems that could lead to your disputing the actual result?
Well, first of all, we've asked very pertinent questions. We want to know why the army is involved in managing this election. Why are they involved in holding on to the ballot papers? They are custodians of electoral materials. They are taking over polling stations. We've given examples, for instance, in the northwestern part of the country, Chavuma and Zambezi, it's the army that has been moving those documents, meaning they've been in possession of these electoral materials. There's some alleged manipulation of results in the opposition strongholds, where the tallies are not allegedly being manipulated. We've asked specific questions to the Electoral Commission of Zambia and would want answers from them before we can accept any result that has been announced.
Now, if you'd like to tap into Africa Here and Now's extensive and growing audience to advertise your product or services, get in touch. Martine@africahereandnow.com. But now let's get back to the man who's vying to become Zambia's next leader. It's been pointed out that perhaps you were a little bit precipitous to publicly state that you'd won the election. I mean, technically that's an offence, isn't it? So perhaps you shouldn't have been so quick to declare yourself the winner of an election that you have already admitted is flawed.
Well, I never declared myself a winner. All I brought out were results of our prior voter tabulation. The UPND equally stated what they had as their results from their PVT. So there was no declaration of a winner on my part. I simply said our polls shows that we are ahead.
And is that, I mean, it's very difficult to talk numbers, isn't it, at the moment, because so few have actually been released so far. But you're still confident, are you, that this new grouping that you represent, that was only formed a couple of months ago, you're still confident that you've got this in the bag, that you can win this election?
Exactly. It's a well-known fact. ECZ knows that. They posed the result after they saw what the position of the result was. It's a well-known fact that our tally was way ahead of that of the UPND.
You've actually gone public as well and suggested that there are foreign mercenaries in Zambia that are being backed by a foreign power. Can you be a bit more specific about that?
Yes, like we stated earlier, there were several attempts on our lives during our campaign trail. And clearly some of the people that were found to be attacking us were not Zambians at all. They could not speak the language. We discovered they may have been coming from across the borders. So the threats on our lives did not start yesterday. And I think we made this very clear. People thought we were merely speculating. It was indeed confirmed on Friday, with the arrival of the army at the residence, with no reason at all. We committed no offense. And as I speak to you, I know not of any offense that I may have committed that would warrant, the soldiers to come and attack my family.
And how was that? How was that situation resolved? You said that you and your family were attacked. Were you taken off the premises? Where were you taken and what happened?
We were taken off the premises. All of us were taken off the premises. There were a couple of vehicles where I was put in a different vehicle from my family. They drove us to the police headquarters. And later they drove us to another place they call the command center. It's a center for the intelligence. So an officer approached me. I asked him, I requested from him to release my family, that they were not involved in all these politics, and that they should release my 12-year-old children and my wife to go back home. That's when he informed me that he would actually also release me so that I can be with the family. And 30 minutes later, we were actually released. The rest of the people were still being held. I was not told under what authority they released me, because I didn't even know under what law I was arrested. I was just later released like that.
Many people have pointed out that this is not the Zambia they know, that political conditions, democratic situation has declined dramatically in the last 5 years, obviously the term of this president. But you yourself obviously were a member of the PF, the Patriotic Front, which is also ascribed, is held responsible for having an appalling record in terms of governance, in terms of democracy and human rights. I mean, do you have any kind of regrets now as to what you were obviously part of when you were a member of the Patriotic Front under Edgar Lungu?
Yes, indeed, Martine. The PF had its own shortcomings, but it did not descend to this level that we've descended to. And like we've stated in our various discussions, the first thing we did when we lost power, we denounced political cadreism and made an undertaking that there would be no cadreism in our political formation going forward. We have demonstrated that. We went to 9 provinces and had close to 70 political rallies. There was no violence at all in any of these rallies.
So cadreism is by and large, it's young men, isn't it, who are intent on political violence? I mean, that's the definition, yes?
The political violence, that's right. Yes, so we had no political violence whatsoever. You would be interested to know that in many cases, our members were actually provoked by members of the UPND, members of the ruling elite. Now, because we made a promise to the country that will stop political violence, we told our members to exercise maximum restraint. So we achieved very peaceful campaigns through and through. So like I said, yes, we had our own shortcomings as a PF. We have since reformed, but we never descended to the levels that this country has descended to.
And finally, Mr. Mundubile, I would like to ask you this. If you are declared the winner of this election, the present president, the incumbent, Hakainde Hichilema, would be the only surviving predecessor, the only surviving former president of Zambia. How would you deal with him? What would you give him? Would you be minded to give him a role in your government? And secondly, if you were to find evidence of corruption, would you lift his immunity so that he would face charges and have the opportunity to clear his name?
I have made an undertaking before the Zambian public that we do not only want to change government, but we also want to change how government works. One of the things we promised the Zambian people was that we were going to look after the former president. We are going to change the trend and ensure that the office of the former president is respected. I assured my dear brother, the president of Zambia, that he should not expect any persecution from my side. We will protect his office and ensure that we give it the dignity that it deserves. So I would like to repeat here that that remains the position. That remains my position.
And if you were to find evidence of corruption?
Well, if there is evidence of corruption, I must be very clear. We will not interfere with how the government governance institutions operate. Yes, because it would be wrong for me now to immediately state that will interfere with how government institutions are operating. Today, we have these big problems because President Hakainde Hichilema interferes with how the Anti-Corruption Commission works, how the police works, how all the other institutions work. That's why we're in this position today. So I would like the institutions to work independently. So if at all he is found wanting by law, my role I would only come in maybe to give him parole after, but I would not interfere with the processes as they begin. We would want, the rule of law to take center stage in our governance.
And another thing that's been pointed out to me is that Zambia today is not the Zambia of independence, one Zambia, one nation, and that people have been polarized very much along ethnic, linguistic, and regional lines. How would you approach this issue, this very, very divided country, if you were to become president? I mean, how many people from different parts of the country would you have in your government, for instance?
Yes, like I said, everything starts from what we're telling the people now during the campaigns and in our manifesto. So in our manifesto, we have talked about reconciliation as our first assignment. And secondly, when you look at our Republican Constitution, under Article 259, it talks about a regional diversity in making appointments to public service. So that is actually provided for by law. So our commitment is that we will go by what the Constitution provides when it comes to appointments to government office. We'll make sure that we take into account regional diversity, even in areas which are our non-strongholds. We'll make sure that we incorporate people from those areas to senior positions in government. That is one way of uniting this nation. What has divided this country is exactly that. So we'd like to reverse the trend.
Well, what did you make of that? Brian Mundubile, who wants to become Zambia's 8th president. We were talking on Sunday, the 16th of August. Let me know your thoughts. Drop me an email, martine@africahereinnow.com. Remember to like, subscribe, and share.